Hello and welcome back to the Audible Finish, our weekly show discussing the week gone by in the world of wrestling. I am your host, Dimitri Kalos, and alongside me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, Thanasi. We have a jam-packed schedule to go through in this week's episode, including our review of AEW's All In event at Wembley. We will also look into AEW and WWE's weekly television shows and give our predictions for AEW's All Out and WWE's Payback events scheduled for this weekend. If you are enjoying the podcast and have a moment, please like, share, and subscribe. Before we get into All In, we're going to do a quick recap of what occurred on the pre-taped Collision show that aired on TV. And that's it. Would you like to do the honors?
Let me take it off. So the show opens with Jack Perry giving a very poor excuse of a eulogy for the FTW title. Just before he uses the sledgehammer to lay it to rest, Hook arrives to hit him with a T-bone suplex through the table, mind you, and set up their Wembley match. The opening contest of the evening is Orange Cassidy, Penta El Zero Miedo, Eddie Kingston versus Butcher, The Blade, and Kip Sabian. For the finish, Eddie hits an exploder. We get a Superman punch from Orange and a pile driver from Penta for the 1, 2, 3. And there's a babyface promo then ahead of the Stadium Stampede. The best friends say that they're not going to head to Wembley to hug. They're going to hurt their opponents, and it's all for Sue. Eddie then heads to the back. He's trying to find the heels, the BCC. He's in a bit of a rage. He's going to gut up Santana and Ortiz. He's going to save Claudio for last. He's going to burn him up. And then he kisses the camera, kind of like a Michael to Sonny in The Godfather. I love that part. The Dark Order took on Darius Martin and Action Andretti. The finish came with a discus forearm, enziguri stunner, and German suplex by Dark Order for a double jackknife pinfall victory. Also in the show, we had Big Bill accompanied by Ricky Starks getting the win with a chokeslam against the Jobber. Willow Nightingale defeated Robin Renegade with the sit-out gut-wrench powerbomb. Keith Lee defeated another jobber, Zicky Dice, Limitless hit a big pop-up sit-up powerbomb for the squash. And then in the main event of the evening, it was a big one. JR and Joe were on commentary joining the team. It was Hook, Darby Allin, Sting, and CM Punk taking on Jay White, Luchasaurus, Swerve, and Brian Cage. Some highlights of this match include Hook getting the hot tag in with some hip tosses, a Northern Lights suplex. The heels illegally, however, pull him out and start smashing him into the barricade. Brian Cage used the turnbuckle to soften him up too. Hook is far too banged up to deliver the Northern Lights suplex on him at first, but he does eventually succeed and adds a vertical suplex to boot and set up the hot tag to CM Punk, the real world champion. Punk hits a leg lariat on Switchblade, neckbreaker on Swerve, Shining Wizards to both, and then he hits a bulldog and clothesline combo with some Hogan taunts. He body slams and elbow drops Jay White. Swerve illegally hits a roll through reverse STO on him, and then we get a sequence with all the competitors getting involved in the match. Hook hitting his T-bone. We get Luchasaurus with the choke slam, Sting hitting the Scorpion Death Drop, Darby with the Ace of Spades on Jay White. Cage gets a power bomb and a spin release fireman's carry facebuster. It's kind of like an F5 with rotation. And then Punk hits the GTS and wins with the Coquina clutch to knock Brian Cage out. Joe is absolutely livid, comes off the commentary. Jack Perry heads down as well. He's got a Singapore cane in hand. Sting and Darby hit chair shots on Swerve and Cage. Absolute, utter freaking chaos as Joe Irish whips the champ into the ring steps, lifts the real world title belt up to close the show. That is our big lead into All In. Dimitri, back to you.
And on that note, let's go straight into it. So we're going to start off with what happened on the 0 hour of All In. The first match that featured was MJF and Adam Cole, Bebe, versus Aussie Open for the Ring of Honor World Tag Team Championships. Now, a couple highlights from this match. Before the match actually started, Aussie Open attacked them to try and get an advantage. During the match, Fletcher's groin takes some heavy damage, which was much to MJF's delight. Davis saves Fletcher from a double clothesline. An Aussie Arrows hit on MJF for a 2. And this is when we finally got MJF hitting the kangaroo kick, the much anticipated kangaroo kick, which turned out to essentially be a double drop kick on both competitors. And then MJF and Adam Cole hit the double clothesline for the win. So the two best friends pick up the Ring of Honor World Tag Team Championships exactly as they wanted. Following that, we had a shot in the crowd of Mercedes Moné. So that was a very hyped moment that got the entire crowd going, and now potentially we're going to see her get involved with AEW. We don't know, but that was another interesting moment that happened in the 0 hour, and they showed another shot of her during the main card as well to get the crowd up and running again. We then had Hook versus Jack Perry for the FTW Championship. This was an FTW rules match. Now, Hook managed to get the win here, but the biggest news item coming out of this match was when Jack Perry was heard audibly saying, when referencing the limousine's windshield, "Real glass, Crimea River." Now, for those who are keeping tabs, or for those who aren't, just for clarification, this is in relation to an incident that apparently happened back a couple of Collision episodes ago, where Jack Perry wanted to use real glass, and he was advised by many, chiefly by CM Punk, to not go through with that idea. So this seemed to be him having a bit of a dig against CM Punk. And as we know, CM Punk is no stranger to confrontation. After this match, it was reported following the pay-per-view that he and Jack Perry got into a scuffle backstage that was about this issue. And this has led to another brawl at one of AEW's flagship events. And it seems, as per reports, that both competitors are being suspended. And potentially, this is the breaking point for CM Punk, who may have quit from AEW. So lots of speculation coming out of this, lots of tension. Thanasi, what do you make of all this drama?
Well, I've heard a couple of things coming out of it. First of all, and we're going to get to Dynamite later, but when I was watching Dynamite, there was an ad that played that showed CM Punk very, very prominently for Collision. So at least if he's quit, if he's gone, if he's sacked, he hasn't been taken off the board yet. If he's suspended, it doesn't look as if they're trying to make it out as if he's not going to be on the show on Saturday because they're putting him in the graphic. Overall, though, I mean, I feel just going to declare I am a big CM Punk fan, and my understanding from the internet is that the bloke had no car, no means of transport when he arrived in London. He actually took public transport to get to his hotel, so he could not possibly have been in a good mood. However, he did show some professionalism because the scuffle occurred between the end of the pre-show and he had the opening contest. So if he was ever going to no-show, if he wanted to quit, he would not have gone out to wrestle. So props to him for doing so. They're investigating. We'll see what's going to come out of it. But overall, it's really not a great look for this to be happening again.
I absolutely agree. And if this is indeed CM Punk quitting, then at least he went out with a bang, because the opening contest, as you mentioned, was him versus Samoa Joe for the Real World Championship. Thanasi, take us through what happened in this match.
I'm very happy to. Well, I mean, as soon as Cult of Personality hit, the crowd absolutely exploded for Punk. Even though the acoustics, they're not fabulous in these stadium shows, that's a thing across continents. It's just a thing where we don't have the echo chamber happening. And of course, there are Joe chants in the early going that we can pick up as well. Some of the highlights from this match, Punk, he predicts the nope walkaway that Joe loves to do when someone's in the corner, and he gets a Hurricane Rana out of it. But he gets cocky because Joe successfully nopes the springboard attack onto the outside. Punk also escapes the Muscle Buster attempt, and he gets the roundhouse kick in. We hit some shoulder tackles, a spin-out powerbomb, Hogan taunt, leg drop for a 1 count. All of this referencing, of course, John Cena / Hulk Hogan. However, Joe starts hulking up here. So he gets up. There's a power bomb that Joe delivers for a 2 count, and he immediately transitions into an STF. He is, of course, the Samoan submission specialist. Punk uses some pins to escape, so he's very clever in his submission escape as well, both very well versed in that. Punk hits a spinning toe hold in an homage to Terry Funk. Hits a Shining Wizard turned into a Uranagi by Joe. Joe looks for the Muscle Buster again, but Punk, ever the heel, bites the forehead of his opponent. Punk was actually healing it up quite a bit in this match. And it's at this point when they're both up on the corner, after Punk has bitten the forehead, that Punk hits the Avalanche Pepsi Plunge for the victory. A real reference to their early 2000s Ring of Honor combats. And in spite of playing the heel during this match, Punk is very gracious with the crowd afterwards. He even poses with a trans rights sign with a fan in the front row.
Indeed. And I think we would be remiss if we failed to mention that in this match, Punk bled. And it happened in a very vicious incident where Samoa Joe essentially tossed him into the bottom of the announce desk. And this is a spot I actually haven't seen happen before, really. And I thought it was quite unique. And when CM Punk bleeds, it usually means something. And that will become a bit more relevant later on as we discuss some of the more violent matches. But before we get to that, we've got to talk about Bullet Club Gold and Konosuke Takeshita versus the Golden Elite, in this variation being Kenny Omega, Hangman Adam Page, and Kota Ibushi. Now, honestly, this wasn't one of the best matches on the card, I would say. Certainly, they went out there to entertain, but I got the vibe that this was the equivalent of a house card for a main event, type level pay-per-view. So, not much happened, but I found one of the more engaging moments was actually when good old JR on commentary sort of called out the ridiculousness of no one following the tag team rules. At one point, he even says, who are the legal men? Just in reference to the fact that there was chaos in the way the match went out. It finished with Takeshita rolling up Kenny Omega for the win. So they're continuing their little beef. Gives Bullet Club Gold and Konosuke Takeshita a nice little win over the Golden Elite. And all in all, just a tight little match. Not much to report on. Anything you want to add to this, Thanasi?
Look, I think overall, I actually did predict this would happen, and it did end up setting up a match for All Out. So we'll hear a little bit more about that later.
Absolutely. Let's now move on to FTR versus the Young Bucks for the AEW World Tag Team Championships. Thanasi, you followed this one intensely as well. What happened?
I did. So there was a couple of interesting points to pick up from this match. So in the early going, the Bucks isolated Cash Wheeler. He mounts a comeback, however, with a European uppercut off the springboard attack. And Dax comes in with suplexes and wrist locks. A German suplex, Three Amigos as well. He's responding to Matt's hitting a Northern Lights suplex, Three Amigos as well. So there's a bit of technical action here, but it does get a little bit more indie wrestling, shall I call it that way. FTR do end up hitting an assisted pile driver for a 2 count. They fail to hit the attempt at the Shadow Machine. And the Bucks respond with an assisted pile driver of their own, and they fail to convert the Indie Taker. So there's symmetry here to indicate how closely matched these teams are. Later on, FTR hit an FTR trigger, and then a Shadow Machine for a 2.99 count. Cash misses the springboard 450, just like he did in 2020, and he cops a super kick. Looks like it's over, but he kicks out. Dax now walking right into a Shadow Machine by the Young Bucks, that is, leaving Cash vulnerable to a BTE trigger, which again he kicks out of. We're so close. However, the Bucks now set up for the Meltzer driver, which is broken up to set up a Shadow Machine. Out of nowhere, 1, 2, 3, the champions retain it on this one. Very gracious again. The champions, FTR, extend their hands for a handshake, but the Bucks refuse and they walk out. And later on Dynamite, there is a little segment that explains what happened there, but essentially a little bit of a show of sore loser from these guys.
Yeah, a little bit. So yes, that is correct. I did predict this, so I was ecstatic with the result. But I say, how familiar are you with the previous 2 bouts between these teams?
It's been a while since I've seen the matches, to be honest with you.
It's the same for me. And the thing I was curious about is everyone seems the discourse hasn't necessarily been about how great the match was everywhere. A lot of people are talking about that, but some people are comparing it. And what I found curious is some people think this was the worst of the trilogy. I personally don't, I'm not as familiar with the original matches. I wasn't following AEW as intently back then. But the reason I bring that up is this did not feel like it was the swan song to the rivalry, as was perhaps suggested earlier on, especially with the rejection of the handshake. It feels to me like they are setting up that eventually down the line they will meet again. Did you get that vibe as well?
I did get that vibe. However, I think, and of course, we'll speak about Dynamite a little bit later, but if I can just give a little spoiler, backstage after this, they recorded a segment where the Bucks actually apologized to FTR for not shaking their hands. They showed some remorse there for being sore losers, and then the four of them were confronted by BC Gold. So perhaps this is going to be a little bit more of a Young Bucks FTR on the same page, or they're going to turn on each other very, very soon. It's going to be a bit of a bait and switch, and they're going to set up the rematch coming very soon. Maybe a specialty here. Maybe it's not going to be a wrestling match. Maybe they're going to jump inside the steel cage.
Who knows? We've got to monitor it to see where this moves forward. But let's now move to the next match of the night, which was the Stadium Stampede. So this featured the Best Friends, Penta, and Eddie Kingston versus the BCC, Santana, and Ortiz. And I said, this was a just series of insane, extreme moments, and frankly, there were too many to name all of them. So I'm going to do my best to report on exactly what happened. The first notable thing I've got here is John Moxley brings out the skewers. The first time I saw this image, it made me physically sick. I'm not going to lie. So the idea of having to see it again happen on to him, I thought was too much to bear. But thankfully, this time I think I must have been desensitized to it because I managed to handle it a little bit better. But still, the image of the skewers hanging from the head just is very uncomfortable. There was John Moxley, as always, he brought out the fork at some point and he savaged Cassidy over the head with it. Actually delivered a brainbuster on Cassidy onto a steel chair. There was a barbed wire 2x4 that was brought into the ring. This was used on Trent Beretta numerous times. Santana hit Beretta with kendo sticks. Eddie Kingston up in the arena in the crowd was bringing out umbrellas to choke out Wheeler Yuta, which again I thought, okay, well, obviously they're preparing for the summery weather that is in London. There was fighting at on top of a bar top in the stadium area. Trent got power bombed onto a ladder in the corner by Santana and Ortiz. Trent got set onto a barbed wire board by John Moxley, and then got pile driven onto the steel steps. So insane action. Sue and her van made an appearance. Offered baking trays to use as weapons as well. Penta came back after being taken out temporarily as Penta Obscuro. He went on top of a ladder near the ramp that actually collapsed the first time they tried to go up it, and it made it a little bit awkward, but they went back up, and he performed a Canadian Destroyer on Santana through two tables set up near the ramp area. The Claudio Castagnoli giant swung Cassidy for 20 revolutions, but the finish came with four orange punches on Claudio. The first three coming in succession for a 2 count, and the fourth coming when Orange Cassidy had gotten duct taped glass over his fist to use on the man, and that finally got the win. Honestly, this was insane. I don't know what more I can add to this. Personally, the issue I had with the match is that you have all these people going through so much violence that it doesn't compute when they kick out. They're putting themselves through so much hell that they're doing near falls after pile drivers and kendo sticks and barbed wire. It's like when you have that happening and then a couple nights later, just a general technical match is enough to make someone stay down for a 3 count. It kind of does lose a bit of its novelty. But obviously the crowd was hot for this, so I don't know. Maybe this isn't just the right type of wrestling for my taste, but I don't know. What did you think of this?
Look, I think I do take your point about the whole kick out thing. I do have the similar view, and I think in this type of a match, it's very easy to get someone to have their partner break up the pin rather than kick out themselves. It lends itself very easily to the format. I think that's something that they can work with there because the details do matter in pro wrestling. It reminds me, I think, of some Combat Zone Wrestling and Ring of Honor crossovers that I've seen in the past, where you've got like these super bloody guys kicking out at a two after copping a brainbuster to a chair. But I do take your point. Overall, however, I would just like to point out when I saw the skewers come out, I likewise felt a little bit wheezy. And the reason is because the first time I ever saw skewers being pulled out was when I was watching Lucha Underground circa 2017-18. I think it was Jimmy Crane. And I think Penta in that match was involved. This was just before he became world champion at Lucha Underground. And he delivered a DDT onto Jimmy after he had shoved skewers into the head. Yeah, pretty gruesome stuff. Pretty gruesome stuff indeed.
You didn't need to bring that up, Thanasia. Oh my god. All right. Well, let's quickly move on now and get off the skewer talk. So we're going to talk about the four-way women's match for the AEW Women's Championship. This saw Hikaru Shida versus Toni Storm, Saraya, and Dr. Britt Baker. Thanasia, how did this one play out?
Let me take care of this one. So Saraya, of course, has a notable entrance to Queen's We Will Rock You, and she's accompanied by all her family. It's a beautiful moment. And in match, Storm and Saraya appear in the beginning to be on the same page, but that quickly deteriorates. At ringside, Saraya's mother holds up Britt so that Toni can hit her with a strike to the face, but Britt dodges, and that leads to Saraya's mother getting knocked out. So now the outcasts are separate. Ruby Soho did emerge to try to play peacekeeper, but she gave up after an inadvertent strike by Toni Storm. As we get to the finish, Britt locked in the rings of Saturn on Hikaru Shida, but behind her back, Saraya sprays into the face of Toni Storm, plants her patented Cradle DDT, and wins her maiden AEW Women's World title in the UK. Beautifully, her family's there in the ring to celebrate with her. This was just a real feel-good moment. There's not really much to say about this match, except for the fact that Saraya is well and truly back. She's at the top of a women's division in a major promotion, and she got her big moment in front of 80,000 plus.
And for me, this is continuing a problem that I have, which is the idea of transitional champions. I feel that I'm happy for Saraya. I think she got the moment. Honestly, I forgot about her being the hometown favorite. In my predictions, I went for Dr. Britt Baker. And as the match played out, I realized, actually, this does make sense for what they're going for. But I don't like the fact that Hikaru Shida ended Toni Storm's reign, held it for less than a month, and lost it. It just feels like it is a bit of a mess where they're just throwing it to whoever just for those feel-good moments. And you have to wonder how earned are those moments if everyone's going to get one every now and then. So hopefully Saraya can hold on to it for a little while now and actually build up the reputation of the championship again.
I think just a point to make is that I think the original plan was for Jamie Hayter to walk in as champion, still be in a fatal four-way, and have to overcome the odds. So I think the goal was always to have a hometown favorite win the title. I guess Saraya maybe was in the right place at the right time, capitalized on the injury. That happens in wrestling. But if I can just make this small point, I do resent Toni Storm, an Australian, walking out to God Save Our Queen in the UK. We have an assistant minister for the Republic in Australia now. We've got to move past this. We've even got Aussie Open in the same faction as Will Ospreay with the United Empire. Come on, guys. Like, let's be independent. We're moving on.
Couldn't agree more, Thanasi. Couldn't agree more. Let's now move on to Darby Allin and Sting versus Swerve Strickland and Christian Cage in the Coffin Tag Team match. Some notable highlights from this. Sting brought out a cricket bat, which for us Australians and Brits, we are very familiar with this weaponry. So that was a nice little moment for me. I'm not going to lie, I did mark out a little bit watching at home. He delivered a splash on Swerve with a thumbtack jacket, the same as what Darby Allin wears every now and then. Christian at one point taped up Darby's wrists to try and restrict his movement, but Darby managed to do a springboard moonsault and suicide dive whilst having his wrists taped up. There was a concerto set up, but Darby managed to narrowly avoid it, which was thankful for him. Christian was sat on a steel chair at one point on the outside, and Darby drop kicked him the same as he did on Collision an episode ago. Christian was put in the coffin at one point, but this was the first tease of the night. Luchasaurus managed to intervene for the save. Nick Wayne then came out trying to step up to Luchasaurus, and Luchasaurus, like the true monster he is, took no damage whatsoever and managed to inflict lots of damage likewise on Nick Wayne, and this took both of them out of the match. So they weren't able to interfere any longer. The finish saw a very unique sequence happen where the coffin was brought into the ring. Swerve tried to put Sting in there and to add insult to injury, tried to bury him with his baseball bat. This proved to be a fatal mistake on Swerve's part because Sting used the baseball bat to keep the coffin ajar. Eventually, he managed to get his way out, turned the offense back on Swerve, hit him with a Scorpion Death Drop on top of the coffin, managed to get him in. Swerve managed to keep himself in the match using his fingers to keep the coffin door open, but Darby Allin took care of this. Eventually, he delivered the coffin drop on Swerve while on the top of the coffin, which was making up for an earlier mistake where he attempted the same maneuver but landed on his own on the coffin. This time, he landed it on Swerve, which gave him enough damage to roll Swerve into the coffin and close the door on him. So Darby Allin and Sting's unbeaten streak as a tag team continues, and Christian Cage avoided getting buried for the second time in AEW. So I think all in all, a very joyous result for everyone. Thanasi, what did you think?
Look, this was a nice little tag team match. I mean, I think I'm actually more excited for Darby coming up with his TBS title shot against Luchasaurus at All Out. I think this was good to get him on the card. I really liked the spot with Sting hitting the leg drop through the table. A nice, safe way for him to actually have a big spot. But overall, well done to the guys.
Well, that takes us into the next match of the night, which saw another hometown hero in Will Ospreay go up against wrestling legend Chris Jericho. And I see a dream match. Tell us how it went.
Let me tell you. So, Fozzy actually performed Judas live here. And of course, Chris Jericho couldn't help himself, did the air or call and response singing as a callback to, of course, Freddie Mercury. Jericho actually attacked Ospreay at Rev Pro the night before, just like he attacked Kenny at All In 2018, if you remember. Ospreay did make a reference to the fact that he was going to do an indie show on Dynamite in the Go Home show. I want to do justice to this match. So I want to outline just the sheer highlights of this match. So there was a sky twister, a corkscrew moonsault to the outside by Will Ospreay, followed by a springboard elbow strike on the inside. And then Jericho Germans Will Ospreay on the apron and follows it up with a vertical suplex. So a lot of big action here. Jericho turns the Oz Cutter into a code breaker on the back. So a little bit kind of like a backstabber, I suppose, and pairs it up with a front code breaker as well. But it's not enough to keep Ospreay down because he does end up smacking the springboard Oz Cutter. And he also hits a Spanish fly, to which the Demo God actually responds with an Oz Cutter of his own and the Judas effect. I think the one slight weakness in this match, there was a pretty awful powerbomb by Ospreay. I think Jericho accidentally might have sandbagged him or misstepped, but the Stormbreaker was delivered perfectly. It only produces a 2 count though, and then as we head to the finish, the hidden blade is given to Jericho after he flips the Brit off, and it is the second Stormbreaker that proves to be the difference for Will Ospreay to get victory. He celebrates with the London faithful in the crowd, as Jericho dismisses Sammy Guevara's consolation attempt. Overall, this was a fantastic match. Like, this is possibly Jericho's best match in AEW. Really, really proud of what he's able to achieve. I mean, the bloke's basically a half centurion. So to be able to keep up with Will Ospreay, and for Ospreay to bring him to this level, hands down, just well done to these guys for a fantastic match.
Completely agree. This is probably my favorite Jericho match in AEW. Uh, Honestly, he looked 5-10 years younger paired with Ospreay in the ring, which is a testament to both competitors, as you said. Thrilling, and I think there were some reservations of this match going in just purely to Jericho's age, myself included in that camp. But he proved me wrong, as Jericho does every now and then, showing exactly why he is the icon with over 3 decades of wrestling experience at this point. So after that match, Nigel McGuinness came to the ring and he formally announced the paid attendance at 81,035. This is the highest ever paid attendance for a wrestling event. So AEW have broken records and they have justified the tagline of the biggest event in pro wrestling. So this was amazing, and quite frankly, the 81,035, you could hear them the entire night. They were so excited for this. And I think they elevated the quality of the pay-per-view. I think there were plenty of great matches going on, and the action was very entertaining, but I think they made it even better, which is the value of having fans there live to watch and create the atmosphere. The next match we had on the card, this was the penultimate match on the card, and it was House of Black versus the acclaimed and badass Billy Gunn in a no-holds-barred match for the AEW World Trios Championships. Thanasi, take us through the match.
So I think the one thing to note, at least at the beginning of this match in the entrance, House of Black entered with a lantern and they put it down at the rampway. The fans lit the fireflies during the entrance as respect for the late Bray Wyatt. I guess in this match there were 2 or 3 big moments that I want to allude to. The first one is that the acclaimed broke Julia's heart because they hit a Sesame Timbers on her in the ring in the early goings as well. And Billy Gunn showed his resilience when he kicked out of the end, which WWE fans will remember as Black Mass, the roundhouse rotational kick by Aleister Black at the time, Malachi Black in this case. In the end, it takes a Fame Asa, a rival, and mic drop on Brody King to get the ultimate result. We have new champions.
We have new champions, and I will say this to credit Brody King, it wasn't just one arrival and one mic drop elbow. It was 2 of each. So he did manage to withstand quite a bit of punishment. So when you've got your monster taking the pin, you might as well, hit him with a barrage of attacks to justify it. This takes us into the main event of the night, which was MJF versus Adam Cole for the AEW World Championship. But I'm going to go through what happened, but I just want to say this might be my favorite AEW match of all time. And it's not necessarily because of all the in-ring action, which AEW is quite known for at this point, is putting on spectacles just from a technical standpoint and athletic standpoint. But I loved the storytelling they did in this match. So let's go into it. Before wrestling, they both moved to the outside and they put on their Better Than You Baby shirts. So a nice little sign of camaraderie amongst the 2 competitors. There's a solid exchange that's shared, followed by a handshake. Later on, MJF offers another handshake, but uses the opportunity to poke Cole in the eyes. Cole slaps him in anger and actually starts doing some hair pulls, so he starts getting heelish, and even more so than MJF. So Adam Cole really did play the heel in this match. The crowd was very much behind MJF. And to add to these heelish antics, Adam Cole actually takes off MJF's shirt and throws it away and starts gouging at his eyes at points as well. MJF notably hit a suicide dive. It took him 2 attempts to actually get the willpower to go through with it, but he hits it, rolls Adam Cole straight back into the ring for a 2. Just a quick point I want to add is that even when hitting a suicide dive, he's still trying to win the match. And that's a little pet peeve of mine, is that some people hit suicide dives and it's just dead just for the sake of it. He actually tried to make a point of it. MJF catches Cole at one point and actually power bombs him onto his knee. MJF goes for a Panama Sunrise, but this gets countered into a super kick. Cole hits the Heat Seeker, which is MJF's move, and MJF manages to break the pin by putting his foot on the bottom rope. Cole drops MJF with a brainbuster onto the steel steps. Now, this was one of the biggest spots, and this one got an audible gasp out of the 81,000 in attendance. It really looked vicious, and after the match, MJF really made a point of selling it as well as during. So that was a very vicious moment. MJF actually managed to break the count because it was going for a count out at 9, so just getting back in the ring. I'll come back to this moment after the overall review of the match itself. MJF sets up for a tombstone on the announce table, but he pulls it out because he doesn't want to hurt his best friend. This is one of those narratives going on in matches. He doesn't want to be the complete devil. But Cole then goes through with it himself. So he has no reservations. He only wants the world title at this point. And the desk had no give at all. So that looked just as vicious as the brainbuster onto the steel steps. Cole gets MJF into the ring, but he kicks out at 2. He hits a Canadian Destroyer with MJF instinctively bouncing up and hitting a super kick on Cole, and this is set up for a rest spot. After that, they both called for the double clothesline, landing it on one another and pinning each other afterwards for 1, 2, 3. So at this point, as far as we were aware, it was going to be a draw. Cole asked for 5 more minutes, harking back to their previous encounter, and MJF responds, no, 5 minutes isn't enough. We're going till we got a winner in effing Wembley. That got a huge pop out of the crowd. The referee gets knocked down accidentally, and MJF uses this as an opportunity to grab a steel chair. Both he and Adam Cole try to do the Eddie Guerrero spot of faking the chair shot to the head. Cole collapses onto the mat, seemingly winning this exchange, but MJF cleverly just puts the chair around his neck and holds it and collapses himself. The referee gets up at this point, and before he has a chance to put 2 and 2 together and call for the DQ finish, MJF, having finished playing possum, rolls up Adam Cole for an attempted pinfall, but Adam Cole kicks out at 2. Adam Cole hits a straitjacket German suplex on MJF onto the ring apron, so continuing this vicious streak in this match. He then goes for a Panama Sunrise on the floor, and then rolls him into the ring for a 2 count. Cole goes for Panama Sunrise again, but this time, instead of catching MJF, he catches the referee with it. Cole then hits Panama Sunrise again and pins MJF, but obviously, with the referee taken out, he can't get the count. At this point, there's the slowest count ever by a referee. So when I say he didn't manage to get it, I mean that MJF maybe had 20 seconds worth to actually get through by the time the referee was finally going for the 3rd slam on the mat. At one point, MJF actually teased using the diamond ring, but he puts it away. Roderick Strong then interferes into the ring, and he punts MJF in the balls. And then Cole at this point actually takes his shirt off. So now he's completely off the Better Than You Baby bandwagon, grabs the AEW title that was thrown in by Roderick Strong to use on MJF, but he hesitates and he throws it away. And this leads to Roderick Strong actually leaving the area in anger, and MJF gets an inside cradle pin on Cole to retain his title at the end of an epic encounter. And afterwards, the post-match, just as much drama. Cole, distraught and angry, he throws the Ring of Honor World Tag Championships away. MJF, himself pissed off, actually gives Adam Cole his title and says, "Use it, hit me, prove that you were never my friend." Adam Cole teases it. The whole crowd is begging no. He throws it away. The two embrace for a big hug, and Adam Cole holds MJF's hand up in triumph. So the two best friends that everyone thought one or the other was going to turns out no, they left All In still in the best of moods together. and that was the end of an epic encounter. Uh, Honestly, fantastic. I only have one reservation really for the match that really uh, uh, annoyed me, which is that Adam Cole so desperately wanted the AEW World Title, and yet when he hit the brainbuster on MJF, instead of breaking the count, he allowed it to go to 10. And I think psychologically, it didn't make sense for him at that point to just let MJF make the save. And likewise for MJF, when you're that injured, maybe it would have made more sense for him to just stay out on the outside. So that was literally one minor gripe I had with the match. Other than that, I thought it was fantastic. Thanasi, do you have any thoughts on this?
Oh, I have many thoughts on this. I loved a lot of the storytelling that was going on here because I mean, if you go back and you look at a lot of the moments like MJF being unable to hit the suicide dive, choosing not to hit the diamond, hitting with the diamond ring, not being able to hit the tombstone, it was all MJF showing these moments of mercy of like, no, I can't do it. I can't hit my friend. Adam Cole, except for that very, very last spot, shows absolutely no hesitation in being absolutely brutal. Even going so far as to rip the shirt off of MJF, because he took off the shirt voluntarily when it was for him to remove it, but he tore it off of the champ. But I think just a couple of observations, if I can just step back a little bit. I am sure, 100% certain, that the boom and the Adam Cole Bay chants during Adam Cole's entrance were freaking enormous, right? And it was at this point that when I was watching it, I started to get WrestleMania vibes here. I was like, yes, this is like the main event of your show. This is enormous. I thought it was absolutely huge. But overall, I think just that symmetry that they had with their first match, I thought was absolutely beautiful because I guess when I was listening to it, I thought that the response to 5 more minutes was going to be yes. And in fact, he said no because 5 minutes is not enough. I thought that was just absolutely wonderful. Seeing MJF play let's say like the makeshift babyface, right? Like kind of more like an anti-hero. I thought he did really well. I mean, the crowd is very willing to cheer MJF like they were. And it might be, a bit controversial to say, but I think not breaking them up yet is a great call. Like, good on them for taking it. I mean, why not just extend this storyline until we see the opportune moment to break them up? It didn't have to happen so soon. And I mean, actually, one of the final graphics on the screen was that there's going to be an All in 2024. So perhaps that can be the appropriate venue for something like that to happen. We don't have to have the blow off immediately. So overall, and also noting that the Kingdom were looking mortified on the ramp, overall, we have a lot of material, a lot of ingredients to keep this story going. So perhaps the next chapter is better than New Bebe confronting the Kingdom.
Perhaps, yeah, I agree. And I think now, having seen what's happened, I don't want them to break up anytime soon, because otherwise I feel it will diminish the value of having held off doing it at All In the way everyone thought it might play out. And for me, this was a perfect way to wrap up what was one of the best pay-per-views I've seen, at least that comes to mind in recent memory. The predictions-wise, Thanasi, you came out on top in this, 8-5. Are you happy with the way that happened?
I'm very happy with the way it happened because I think I was watching the match. Sorry, I was thinking overall about the pay-per-view. First of all, very, very beautiful pay-per-view overall, right? Congratulations for this wonderful wrestling event because we weren't getting random filler in between matches, and we also weren't structuring it in such a weird way. We went from match to match, very much reminiscent of the Japanese style. And I think that there were a lot of babyface victories on this card. However, MJF technically is a heel, but he had what was essentially a babyface victory. Saraya in storyline is a heel, but she got basically a babyface victory. Those are just a couple of examples for the big world championship matches. But I think going into this, there is that element, like when you've got these super cards, you do want to give babyface victories to get the big pops. And I think overall, my strategy of going for the baby faces was right.
I guess so, and maybe I'm just a cynical old fool that at 21, mind you, old fool.
Well, you're
But
the little brother.
yeah. All right, well, it was a great show. Let's now, before we go on to the rest of AEW's side for the show, we're gonna quickly interject with what happened over in WWE. So, Hanasi, do you want to take us through what happened on SmackDown?
Yeah, I was about to say let's break it up with some WWE action, but unfortunately, SmackDown was not exactly in high spirits. We unfortunately lost two huge legends, two former world champions of wrestling, Bray Wyatt and Terry Funk. One, of course, very, very well before his time. The show opened up on SmackDown with a 10-bell salute to both of those fallen gentlemen. And the opening contest of the night was Rey Mysterio with a black armband for both wrestlers, taking on Grayson Waller. In this match, there was a Hurricane Rana to the corner post, a seated senton, a springboard crossbody, traditional lucha action from one Rey Mysterio. Towards the end of the match, Theory entered to interrupt the 619. However, with the support of Santos Escobar, the 619 was hit, followed by a West Coast pop for the victory by the reigning, defending, current United States champion. The next match on the card was Io Sky against Zelina Vega. This one was for the women's title, and it didn't actually occur to me until partway through the match that it was a championship match. Big highlight from this one, Zelina hits the hammerlock DDT. It was like Andrade, very, very similar to the NXT days. And of course, the victory comes from Io with the running knees to the corner and a moonsault for the victory. Next up, Cody Rhodes cut a promo, an homage to Terry Funk. And he says, of all the nomenclature for wrestlers, both Terry and Bray were true cowboys. We also get a package of career highlights for Terry Funk, including his reign as NWA World Champion, his tenure in all of WWE, WCW, and ECW, and his Hall of Fame induction with his brother, Dory Jr. And following that, there was a Terry Funk hardcore tag team match, Brawling Brutes taking on the Street Profits. Not much to go through in this match, but just briefly, Ridge hit a spin around DDT, but he ate a double underhook DDT from Dawkins and a splash from Ford. And the final spot of the match is a table spot. Finally, we actually got to see something in a hardcore match with a spine buster and neck breaker combo on Ridge through the damn table for the victory. Finally, the last big segment of the match is starring LA Knight, who of course pays tribute to Bray Wyatt, but then transitions to The Miz. He says no one ever cared about The Miz, even when his stunt double outshone him. Of course, that's referring to Damien Sandow or Damien Mizdow. And when The Miz was playing support for Cena and The Rock, the next time Miz sees him, he should run. A reference to Bray Wyatt, of course. And the final contest of the night was therefore Knight versus Finn Balor, Bray's last opponent versus arguably his biggest rival, the first opponent of the Fiend, Finn Balor. Unfortunately, we never got to see the Demon versus the Fiend as we would have liked to have seen. But in this match, LA Knight hit a springboard shoulder smash, a nice neck break after he was smacked off the second rope and onto the top turnbuckle back first. And then as we get to the finish, LA Knight hits a leap up superplex, very reminiscent to the spot from SummerSlam. He goes straight up to the top rope, plus a BFT for the biggest win of his career against former Universal and NXT champion Finn Balor. And the show closer main event is the lantern that is left in the center of the ring. There's an image of Bray Wyatt on the Tron. The fireflies are out from the fans, and we get "Thank you, Bray" chants.
Let's now move on to this week's Raw, and Raw followed suit in paying tribute to our fallen legends in Terry Funk and Bray Wyatt, and they even paid tribute to Bob Barker, who died at 99 in between SmackDown and Raw. So he certainly had a great innings, just one off the century, but many people will remember his bubbly personality, and he was probably the best guest host Raw ever had in that period. So the show started with Sami Zayn versus Damian Priest, with Damian Priest winning after a key intervention from JD McDonough, much to Priest's annoyance. And McDonough was actually attacked post-match by Zayn and Kevin Owens. Later in the night, Zayn and Owens actually confirmed they will wrestle Damian Priest and Finn Balor at Payback in a Steel City street fight for the titles. Next, we heard LA Knight's music play, and the crowd gave a thunderous pop for this, but it turned out that it would then transition into a chorus of boos, as they saw it was actually The Miz cosplaying as the megastar. He disparaged LA Knight, deeming him generic, and that his catchphrases are a cheap way to get fan support, and that at Payback, he will end the fan support by beating LA Knight and showing it's really The Miz's game. The Viking Raiders defeated the New Day, who were left weakened after Drew McIntyre accidentally threw his desk chair at Xavier Woods. This was followed by a tribute video for Bray Wyatt. Imperium came out after that, and Gunther confirmed that he will have a championship rematch next week on Raw with Chad Gable. Chad Gable then wrestled Ludwig Kaiser, with Giovanni Vinci causing a DQ finish right as Gable's about to win with the Chaos Theory. Then, following that, we had a quick tribute video for Bob Barker, and this was followed by Seth Rollins coming out to the middle of the ring and calling out Shinsuke Nakamura. A video package of Nakamura played on the Titantron as Seth Rollins was in the ring, where he said that he wants to dismantle Seth Rollins, the man, and he wants to not just Seth Rollins, the wrestler, and that he will break him. As Rollins responds to the videos, Nakamura managed to sneak into the ring and take him out again with Kinshasa. Tommaso Ciampa beat Bronson Reed to get back to winning ways, which was followed by Rhea Ripley and Raquel Rodriguez brawling in the ring, with Rodriguez coming out on top, and this is in anticipation of their championship match at Payback. A tribute video that played for Terry Funk right before the main event, which was Becky Lynch versus Zoe Stark in a Falls Count Anywhere match. Now, this was the proper tribute for Terry Funk in terms of hardcore extreme wrestling, because these guys went far harder than what had happened on SmackDown. There were kendo sticks, a series of steel chairs were thrown into the ring, which saw Becky get superplexed onto. There was a manhandle slam at one point that but Trish Stratus broke up the pin. Trish then delivered a bulldog on Lynch through a table at one point, right behind the barricade. Becky kicked out of this at 2. The battle transitioned into the crowd from then onwards. Stark accidentally punched Trish Stratus, who fell through a table of her own, and then Lynch manhandle slammed Stark through another table, and this eventually got her the win. And the show closed with her holding her Bray black armband in honor of him. The two shows very much about honoring the legacies of both Terry Funk and Bray Wyatt. And I just want to say thank you to both of them for all their contributions to the wrestling business. On that note, Thanasi, it's now time for us to give our Payback predictions. Now, at the time of recording, 6 matches have been announced. So let's get straight into it. And the first match is Becky Lynch versus Trish Stratus in a steel cage match. Who have you got?
Look, I don't think there's any controversy in saying that the man is going to take this one out. I mean, this should have happened at SummerSlam, but the culmination is happening here. Becky Lynch.
I mean, I can't argue with that. I think it makes perfect sense. I mean, it's not, Becky Lynch isn't exactly the youngest talent in the world, but she's the young talent in this case, so you should be putting over the younger talent, in my opinion, in this particular scenario. The next match we've got is Rey Mysterio versus Austin Theory for the WWE United States Championship. I'm going to go in first, and I'm going to predict Rey Mysterio retains this, and this is purely based on the fact that he very recently won it, and he's facing the champion in which he beat. So I just feel that in terms of making sense, it would be better suited for him to lose it to a fresh opponent.
You can put a +1 on that for me as well. I completely agree with that logic, and I do think that he's going to retain, maybe with Santos Escobar coming more into the fold this time.
Next up, we've got LA Knight versus The Miz. This is one of the matches I'm actually very excited for, because just 2 entertainers being put out in the ring, and I think they're gonna have lots of fun together. And I think LA Knight is going to get the win here. I think that this is part of them building him up and giving him some victories ahead of a push. Maybe I'm being optimistic there, but I just feel with all the fan support he's getting, that's the way it's going. And I see, where do you go? Where do you stand on this one?
Look, I'd like to say that this is the beginning of his push and is going to go on, but I think knowing WWE, they're going to find some kind of a way for The Miz to get the victory here, and that's why I'm predicting The Miz. Hopefully, though, with Retribution coming down the track, perhaps on a slightly bigger stage, I don't know, maybe a Survivor Series.
Okay, well that's an interesting take. We'll see how it plays out. The next match we've got is Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn versus the Judgment Day in the form of Damian Priest and Finn Balor in a Steel City Street Fight tag team match for the undisputed WWE Tag Team Championships. How do you see this one playing out?
Look, I think ordinarily I'd be going for the Judgment Day here. I feel like that's the right way to go. However, WWE has advertised Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens defending the belts against Indus Sher at Superstar Spectacle, I think it's called. It's going to be like a network special.
In India, right?
In India, that's right. So therefore, based on that kind of a spoiler, I'm going to go with my faves, Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens.
I wish I could disagree truly, because you know how much I hate it when we're on the same page. But no, I think you're absolutely right. I think that this is probably going to play out more dissension in the ranks between the two. Although I will say, I would be genuinely up for seeing them somehow win this, and then they have to deal with their beef whilst being the champions.
Hey, look, I would like to say I'm a sucker for factions having all the belts, right? And this would be a really special one because it would be an instance where we've got the woman as the world champion, right? A real step in the right direction for that kind of equality. So we actually have a women's world champion, an NXT mid-carder, and tag belts.
Speaking of Rhea Ripley, the women's world champion, that's the next match. It's her facing off against Raquel Rodriguez. How do you see this one going? Is it
100% Rhea Ripley is winning? Are you kidding me? Like, there is no question about this. Raquel Rodriguez is being fed to Mommy.
okay? Well, I don't think it's being fed. I think the way they presented these two, I'm actually genuinely curious to see these two behemoths of the women's division actually going up against each other. But I agree, Rhea Ripley is going to retain. I think they should honestly have her hold it, at the very least, until the next Mania. Just let her be the champ. She's doing such a great job of it. This now takes us into the main event of Payback as far as we're aware. And it's going to be Seth Rollins versus Shinsuke Nakamura for the World Heavyweight Championship. Can I say, is it a Shinsuke win, or does Seth retain here? What do you think?
I don't trust WWE enough to give Shinsuke the win. When he debuted on the main roster, circa 2017, 2018, it was like, this guy's going to be huge. Every time that we've come close to a push, they've disappointed us. Not to say that I think I'm completely ready for Shinsuke to take it at this point. It just doesn't feel right. I mean, I thought it was going to be Balor, and I'm not going to predict that the immediately next challenger is going to win the belt. Therefore, I am predicting Freakin' to win.
I'm predicting Nakamura, and it's a bit out there. I wouldn't say it's my most confident prediction of this card, but I have a suspicion, and it's purely based on the fact that they've sold the back injury. So I see him either winning, or after a grueling battle, maybe Damian Priest comes out and cashes in, and it gives Seth Rollins a chance for a break.
I like that. I like that. Good prediction.
But I think, especially since now they've made it public, that it's not worth having Seth Rollins wrestle just for however long it takes. I think it sounds like they might be giving him sooner or later some sort of rest time to actually heal up a little bit, and he'll probably want to time it out so that he's well and truly safe for Mania. So I've got Nakamura winning here. I could also see Priest cashing in here. Let's now take a look at what happened on this week's Go Home Dynamite show ahead of All Out. The pay-per-views keep coming. So the show started with Jon Moxley versus Commander, and Moxley managed to get Commander to tap out to an armbar. After that, there was an interview segment, well, not an interview segment, but a pre-recorded segment, as you alluded to earlier, featuring the Young Bucks, FTR, and Bullet Club Gold, and this set up an 8-man tag team match at All Out between the competitors. After that, Toni Storm had a continuation of her breakdown in the backstage interviews, this one being with Renee Paquette. After that, Chris Jericho came to the ring and he had a promo segment, but first he asked Sammy Guevara to come out. He apologized for his conduct towards him at All In. It's worth noting that after the match, Sammy Guevara tried to console him a bit, and he rebuffed him and rejected him. They shake hands, but then they start a passive-aggressive argument battle between the two about their respective failures and shortcomings. And then Jericho makes the suggestion that they go after the tag team championships to repair the relationship, to which Guevara agrees. After that, Eddie Kingston faced Wheeler Yuta for the NJPW Strong Openweight Championship and managed to retain. This was followed by Sammy Guevara with his own backstage interview with Renee. This got quickly interrupted by Don Callis, but Sammy Guevara told him to F off, essentially. This then saw a battle royal announced. So what had happened, another pre-recorded segment from after All In played between Adam Cole and MJF, and they alluded to a battle royal on Rampage this week, which is going to decide who they will face at All Out for the Ring of Honor World Tag Team Championships. And they also announced a Grand Slam World Title Eliminator Tournament, with the winner of said tournament facing MJF on September 20th. Adam Cole then came out to the ring immediately after these announcements and videos, and Roderick Strong and the Kingdom decided to confront him. They tore him a new one about his selfishness and how he uses everyone to advance his career, and this has been a recurring theme ever since he started getting into the wrestling. Strong then announced that he will enter the World Title Eliminator Tournament, win it, and then beat MJF in spite of his neck injury. Chris Statlander, Hikaru Shida, and Dr. Britt Baker defeated Nyla Rose, Marina Shafir, and Emi Sakura in a 6 women's tag team match. And then Ruby Soho attacked Statlander afterwards, and this is in anticipation of their bout at All Out for the TBS Championship. The Acclaimed and Billy Gunn had a celebration of their victory at All Out. They cut a ribbon with giant scissors, courtesy of Daddy Ass, now returning Daddy Ass, Billy Gunn. And this was the beginning of a new era, Anthony Bowen says, the House of Ass. And he introduces the new trios titles, which have pink leather straps that scissor on the edges. So very good for them, customized titles. The main event saw Orange Cassidy versus Penta Zero Miedo for the AEW International Championship. Cassidy managed to retain despite copying 2 Fear Factor pile drivers and significant damage to his already injured right arm, getting the roll-up on Penta for the victory. Afterwards, he took to the mic, very shocking, and essentially said that I am the champion and I'm not relinquishing it to anyone. And he had a face-off with Jon Moxley, who he will face at All Out to close the show. And that was the end of Dynamite. So this takes us into All Out. But before we get to All Out, is there anything you want to add about Dynamite?
I think in all, my comment is that Dynamite was a little bit tame, and I think it's a function of the fact that there was international travel, people trying to rest up ahead of the next pay-per-view. So it didn't really feel like that special go-home show. And also, there were some absences as a result of people attending Bray Wyatt's funeral. 100% understandable there. But can I just say, I'm freaking stoked for this Battle Royal because I want the Hardy Boys to take on Better Than You, Baby. But let's see how we go. We're going to find out soon.
Well, I'm going to give you a bit of a reality check a bit later as we get into these predictions about that, based on what I believe happened from the tapings at Rampage. So, but let's now get into the All Out 2023 predictions. The first match, Luchasaurus versus Darby Allin for the AEW TNT Championship. That's it. I think you've said it many times now. Is it Darby Allin for you?
It's Darby Allin, babyface victory. I mean, he's been going at Christian and Luchasaurus for a little while, so surely it's got to be Darby Allin.
My heart is conflicting with my head here because my head says Darby Allin makes the most sense and is actually probably the right choice. but I just love the image of Christian Cage holding that TNT championship. So for me, I'm backing Luchasaurus here, just more out of hope that I can get more of Christian Cage being the absolute prick that he is.
The father of the year.
The father of the year, my God. Next up, we have Miro versus Powerhouse Will Hobbs. This is going to be another match between two behemoths of a division, in this case, the strongmen. Thanasi, how does this play out?
Look, I think Will Hobbs did make the challenge, and therefore, as the heel, I think he's at least going to get this first victory. Perhaps they're going to have another match down the track, maybe on like a special Dynamite or like a special Collision. But yeah, I'm going with the heel victory on this one to balance it out with my Derby prediction.
I think that's a strong prediction, and quite frankly, I don't have logic to go against it. I just think Miro is an equally large man that's very that's going to pose quite the threat, so I think he's going to get the win here. Next up, Chris Statlander versus Ruby Soho for the AEW TBS Championship. Who have you got?
This one's a little bit of a dark horse, but I actually think that Ruby's going to win it. I think we're going to get something special here. Perhaps, 2 belts in the total of the Outcasts, the seemingly broken up Outcasts. But yeah, I'm actually going to go with Ruby Soho on this one.
That's a bold prediction. I'm not quite as bold as you on this one. I think Chris Statlander is going to take it and it's going to be fairly comfortable. But we'll see how this one plays out. Next up, we've got Bullet Club Gold, the entire faction this time, not just a portion of it, versus FTR and the Young Bucks. I'm going to say that I think Bullet Club Gold wins this purely based on miscommunication or frustration between the other two teams.
Yeah, I think generally as a rule, I prefer that when it comes to tag teams of 2 singles guys versus an established tag team, that the established tag team wins. Therefore, I'm going to go with the established foursome is going to overcome the makeshift foursome.
Following that, we've got Better Than You, Bebe versus, and Thanasi, this is a bit of a spoiler for what happened on Rampage. It wasn't the Hardys. It was the Dark Order in Alex Reynolds and John Silver. So with that information, quite frankly, regardless of who would have won that Battle Royal, I'd predict Adam Cole and MJF to, at the very least, win their first title defense.
Yes, I do think that they will. I mean, probably Matt Taven and Mike Bennett might be the right way for the belts to come off, the representatives of the Kingdom, since Roddy Strong is entering the Eliminator tournament. So therefore, it does mean that Better Than You, Bebe will be retaining in my prediction.
Next up, we have one of your favorites in Samoa Joe versus Shane Taylor for the Ring of Honor World Television Championship. And need I say who you're predicting on this one?
Shane Taylor, Joe is going to kill you. King of television all the way.
Yeah, I completely agree. And look, to be honest, I don't know much on Shane Taylor, so I'm going to use this as a chance to try and scout him and see what he's about. But yeah, you've got it back, Joe, on this one. The next match we have is Eddie Kingston and Katsuyori Shibata versus the Blackpool Combat Club in the form of Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta. On this one, I'm actually backing Eddie Kingston and Shibata. I have a feeling that they're going to get on top, but I think the key frustration is going to be that Kingston didn't get his hands on Castagnoli one-on-one. And this match is very much the one I'm anticipating in the future, just those two going at it one-on-one.
That's an interesting prediction. I'm actually going to go with the heels on this one, purely based on the logic that I said earlier, that they're an established group. But yeah, I'm not extremely confident on this one. I'd rather just see a good, brutal match.
And the next match features the other member of the Blackpool Combat Club in Jon Moxley going up against Orange Cassidy for the AEW International Championship. And I think Moxley's going to be victorious in this one. I think this is the end of Cassidy's International Championship run. And I think for me, the reason I say that is purely based on the way Dynamite closed, which was Cassidy making a big point of the fact he was the champion. He's been a regular defender of his title on TV. And I think for a lot of people, it got to a point where it's like the two were hand in hand and it didn't compute that this guy is a champion in the company. And I think he decided to make a point of it right before he loses it to one of the biggest stars in AEW, and Jon Moxley, and that's why I'm picking him.
I wish I could be as cynical as you, but I can't stand the thought of setting someone up just to knock them back down again. So I have to go with Orange Cassidy on this one. I feel like he hasn't quite gotten to that superstar level of AEW, but even still, I think this is his belt, and he's got a lot more to prove. He's going to complete the threesome now. He's going to complete the set. He's pinned Wheeler, he's pinned Claudio, and I think he's going to pin Mox.
The final match we've got down is probably the most anticipated, and that is Kenny Omega versus Konosuke Takeshita in a singles match to potentially end their rivalry, or perhaps it's the beginning of a series. But how do you see this first bout between the two in AEW going?
Look, I think we saw some good action against the two at All In. Now, when it comes to All Out, we saw the promo package where Don Callis was feeding the information to Takeshita on the weak points of Kenny, his knee, his neck. But overall, I do want to see the babyface come out on top because I'm assuming this is going to be the main event. We like seeing babyfaces win in the main event. So again, using logic, I'm going with Kenny.
And going with my heart, I'm going with Takeshita. And this has nothing to do with any sort of bias against Omega. I think he is an incredible athlete. I don't necessarily think he's the best wrestler in the world, like a lot of other people do. But I just think that these two are going to put on a great show. And I think Takeshita is going to take it out here, and potentially down the line, Omega will beat him in a rematch. So that's the end of those predictions. As we know, this week we've got two pay-per-views going up against one another. So Thanasi, the key question that's worth asking is, which show is going to be better? Obviously, it's subjective, but for you, which one do you think is going to be better?
It definitely depends on what you want. But I think just by law of diminishing marginal returns, we had a pay-per-view from AEW last week. So logic dictates that if another one happens in close, quick succession, that it's not going to be quite at that same level. That being said, there is a good card at All Out, but I think, like I said last week, the real winner is going to be the fans because we're going to have a Saturday and Sunday pay-per-view.
Well, and it's up to the fans at the end of the day to decide which one they like better, or if they just want to be a fan of everything. It's going to be a bit of fun, I think, next week when we sort of compare how the two companies went with their respective shows. So this brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Audible Finish. Next week, as we just mentioned, we will review the events of both Payback and All Out and give our verdict of which one resonated with us better and entertained us more. Thanasi, a pleasure as always to have your company.
It was good to be with you. Let's look forwards to a massive, a mammoth episode next week.
And thank you to everyone for listening. And until next time, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.